Well, hello again, my friends. Jeff here from the Learn Portrait Drawing channel, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series where we are going to draw this guy right here. Now, if you haven't seen part 1 yet, what are you waiting for? Go see part 1. I'll put a link to it somewhere up top here, and there'll be a link to it in the description below. Check out part 1 because that's where we started out fresh. We had a blank piece of paper, and we ended up with something that looked something like this. Now, this video, we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to start turning it more into a realistic picture. We're going to take this line drawing, basically what we left off with, and we're going to start making it more realistic. We're going to start blending, we're going to start shading, and you're going to see how the portrait starts taking on a more realistic look to it. So stick around for that, and before we do, I just want to say, as always, thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing, for commenting. You did subscribe, right? Because if you haven't, I got news for you. You really should punch that subscribe button. That way you know when I have new videos coming out, and you can stay up to date with all the things that we do here on this channel. Alright, why am I talking so much? Let's just get on with the drawing. We're going to pick up where we left off, and yeah, let's roll the clip right now. Okay, and here we are back again, part 2. So, where we left off in part 1, as you could see, it looks kind of cartoony, but we have our layout down, we have our features down. Now we're going to start preparing to blend and take this into a more realistic drawing. So what you can see here as we zoom up a little bit, I'm just using my number 4 pencil, and I'm starting to just establish more where the darker shadows are going to go. So I'm giving an overall sort of glazing over of charcoal. So you can see on this side of the face, this is going to be the shadow side, this whole half. So I'm giving this a little bit more charcoal, and I'm kind of crisscrossing my pencil back and forth. Sometimes I'm going up and down, sometimes I'm going side to side. I'm just kind of almost following the form, you know, of the head and just adding extra charcoal. That's all I'm doing here. So you can see it's slowly getting darker. And this is all before blending, because I know once I start blending, it's going to start smudging everything into one big mess. So I want the darker areas to stay dark. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm just making final touches. Like here, I'm kind of fixing the lips a little bit. The top lip, I want it to be just a little more defined, I guess. And that's normal. You know, at this stage, you're going to see things that need correcting. So just correct them as you go. Now, before I even get a little bit further, you can already kind of tell, and I mentioned it in part 1, that left eye to our left is going to need to change a little bit. We're going to have to shrink that down. Right here on this side of the nose, I got to bring this out just a little bit. Watch this. Watch how little it is. It's so subtle. You can almost not even see where it was before, but we did. We just brought that nostril out just a little bit more because I want it to line up with the eye. You could see on the picture, the reference picture, that the eye starts right at the edge of the nose. So I had to bring that nose, that nostril out just a little bit so it was more in line with the start of the eye. And now here we're going to begin blending. So I'm taking my blending stump, and we're just going over the picture. Now you'll notice what I tend to do is I'm going to start blending the dark areas first and blend over into the light areas, because whatever I blend, you can see right here, it's making this really dark. And so you may not want to go too dark on certain areas. So that's why I'm starting right here. This whole part of the forehead, this is the darkest area. So I'm trying to go there and work my way out towards the middle of the forehead. And that's always a smart thing. I've learned that actually helps, because when you start with the dark side and then blend over to the lighter side, it makes a smoother transition. Because if you started with the light side and blended over to the dark side, then the dark, it doesn't look as good. The dark is way too dark, and there's too much contrast, maybe is the word I'm looking for, or the lines are too hard. I don't know. You'll see what I mean if you try this. But I've found from my experience, like you could see here, I'm starting with this dark shadow side, and then I'll use that charcoal to blend over into the other side of the face. Because right now, if we didn't do any more shading, if we stopped right here, look at how contrasty that is. It's way dark on one side and way light on the other. It almost makes it look like he's standing in a window, like a really bright window. And that's not what we're going for. I'm going to go for more of a subtle shading on this. And in part 3 of this video, which will be after this, we really start talking more in detail about the finer aspects of shading. So stay tuned for that. This, though, in this video, we're actually changing the picture from a line drawing to sort of this more realistic blended version. And you can already tell it's starting to look more realistic just from blending the charcoal. Notice we haven't done any drawing in this video yet. All we're doing is blending. But the blending is going to give you that depth, those subtle changes of depth that make it look more three-dimensional. So I'm just finishing up this side of the shading. I know right here on this side of the cheek is a little bit darker, and down by the chin's a little bit darker. And you can see the lighter areas are up on the cheek. So I'm going to kind of leave those areas to be last, as my big head gets in the way. I must have dropped something. So notice I'm going to kind of shade around this cheek. I'll shade a little bit, but I'm not going directly hard over this cheek, because if you look closely on the picture, that's where the light is hitting. That's the highest point of his cheekbone, is right up in there. So see, I've just lightly went over it. Even like right here, I'm lightly going over this area, but I'm not pressing really hard. And of course, it looks really blotchy, and nothing is smooth at this point, but that's not what we're doing at this juncture. We're not smoothing out anything yet. We're just trying to solidify the colors or the values. Like this upper lip, we can tell is darker than the bottom lip. So I just made that upper lip all one shade. And then down here by the neck, we'll just do a little bit here. Really what I'm trying to do is just take the white off the paper. You know, that nothing should be just white. Even the white of the eyes isn't white. So I'm just kind of making sure there's at least some form of charcoal all over this drawing. That's all I'm doing at this stage. Taking what we did in part 1 and smearing all the charcoal all over the paper. And trying to keep some areas darker and some areas lighter. Now remember, the darker you make something, the more in the background you push it. So if something's further away or you want something to be in the background, make it darker. Like right in here, this part of the eye, you could tell it's further back than the nose. So the eye and the eye sockets are going to be darker. And this side of the face, this side over here of the face is all further away from the light. So it's darker. And that's one thing that I'm learning as I'm going along, and hopefully I can teach you, is constantly ask yourself and question yourself why you're doing what you're doing, what the marks you're making on the paper, why are you making it? There should be a reason. If you're making it darker, is it further away from the light? Is it further into the background? Why are you making this? So back to the drawing here. You can see we're zooming in a little bit. Going to focus mainly on this eye. We'll start here with the left eye. And what I'm doing here is I'm raising the eyebrow because I noticed the eyebrow was not high enough. it was actually a little lower than the other eyebrow. So I need to bring this up. So you'll see me here, I'm slowly bringing this eyebrow up to kind of match the other eyebrow as far as the level it's on. And so I'm just flicking the pencil, and I'm looking at the eyebrow, and I'm seeing how it's not all one big shape. Right here, it's darker. You see that? Look at the reference picture. There's this shape right here. So I'm making that shape, and I'm making that shape darker because it is darker in the reference picture. And then we're just going to kind of blend in a little bit. Let's just blend this area in, smooth out the values, but also trying to mimic that shape of the eyebrow. And notice the eye is also a little too big. The eye that I drew is a little too big. So we're going to fix that as well in this part. So here I'm looking at this upper eyelid, how it comes across here, and then it kind of meets this eyebrow, like right up in here. Right up about halfway. If you look at that dark part of the eyebrow, it looks like it comes right here about the halfway mark. And so I want you to learn how to do that. Look at things and make like measurements. Like I looked at that and I said, oh, that's about in the middle of this dark part. And so that's what I drew. So you always want to look at that. Look at, where things fall on the picture and make your own measurements. I didn't take out any rulers or anything. This is just visual measuring. Visually seeing that falls at that point of the eyebrow. And like right here, I'm looking at this white shape. See this white shape on the reference picture? I'm looking at that, and that's what I'm trying to draw. I'm just trying to draw that shape and that angle. It's almost like a 45-degree angle right here. So I'm trying to just replicate that on the picture. I'm not trying to draw an eye. I'm not trying to draw, any other feature. I'm trying to draw these shapes that I'm seeing. And so by looking at the angles and looking at the shape, we end up drawing the eye or drawing whatever we're looking at. So like right here, we're going to start to try and shrink this eye up a little bit and make it not quite as big. Now one of the things the reason why I blew up the picture the way I did and zoomed in on this eye, that's how you need to look when you're drawing. You need to almost zoom in and just ignore everything else but what you're looking at. And maybe I should preface this little disclaimer and just say, I'm not telling you how to draw. There's so many ways of drawing. Your style might be different than my style. This is just me walking through my thoughts on how I drew this picture and my drawing style. Now you can see we're shrinking that eye up. Notice I erased underneath it, so I'm making it a little more thin. And we're shrinking the eye, and it's already looking a lot better. But back to what I was saying, yeah, this is just me telling you what my thoughts are, how I draw in my style, and sharing that with you because I think it's a great way to draw. It's very free, it's very relaxing, it's liberating, it's satisfying. So if you like this kind of style and you can get something from these videos, then I want you to leave me a comment and let me know if they helped you or not. So I'm kind of just trying to make sure the pupil is dark, but not too dark where it looks like he's got blue eyes or something. The darker you make the pupil, it can make the eye look lighter. So I'm trying to keep it all about the same as what I'm looking at in the picture. Now right under here, he's got this dark area. So I'm just using my little blending tool and just taking the charcoal from that and adding that in here. And I'm going to use my eraser here to shape it. So right here, it's real light on this corner of the eye. And you'll notice it kind of comes down like this. And so I'm gonna try and just blend in and isolate these shapes. So let's just erase this part right here. We know this is lighter on his cheek, but we also need to break it up a little bit. And I'm trying to mimic this shape right here, right on the cheek. There's like this sort of arrow looking shape. And I'm trying to get that shape down, but I'm also don't want to lose this dark area under his eye. And this area under his eye is darker than the area below it. So I'm using my eraser to kind of lighten this up right here. Let's lighten this up. So see, that keeps the darkness under his eye, but it's still dark underneath that. It's darker than the cheek. And these are all these little adjustments that I make at this stage. And you have to constantly look at everything and ask yourself, okay, this area right here, this is dark. Am I making this too dark or too light? Compare it. Compare it to something else. So the eye's looking a little more realistic. We still have to work on it a little bit more here. But we'll just blend some of this charcoal in. Sometimes if I need more charcoal on my blending stump, I'll just rub it against another part of the picture that has some charcoal on it, and then I'll go to a light area, and it's like a nice way of adding a little bit more charcoal in there without actually using your pencil. So we're just trying to define this eye, bring it out a little bit further. And this is a number 2 pencil, a number 2 charcoal pencil to get these little finer areas. The little tiny details, I usually use a number 2 charcoal pencil. And then I'm going to try and get this highlight out. I'm going to use my eraser, which actually that looks pretty good. And then there's a little one over here, but sometimes it's hard, an eraser, to get it out. You'll see right here, I'm trying to get it out. And that doesn't look bad, but here I'm going to use a white pencil. A white charcoal pencil. I'll do that occasionally if the reflective highlight isn't bright enough. I'll use a white charcoal pencil, and look at that, just brought it right out. Now the eye looks super glossy. And we'll just knock that down just a little bit. And already that eye is looking more realistic. It almost looks like it has, you know, like a gloss over it. So working on that upper eyelid, making sure that still connects here, that this shape is still correct. Remember, this part of the eyebrow is darker, so we're just making sure that stays darker. Notice I'm not doing this eyebrow all the way up and over that same darkness. Because you could see in the picture, his eyebrow's not the same darkness. That's a mistake that we make as beginners. We go, oh, an eyebrow, and we draw it all the same. But you got to look at the little subtleties in there and see, oh, there's dark parts of the eyebrow and lighter parts of the eyebrow. So I'm liking how this eye is looking. I really am. And the more you stare at it, the more you starts playing tricks with your mind. You start thinking, oh man, this is a real person staring back at me. You almost forget it's a drawing sometimes. So I'm kind of moving a little bit down to the nose here. I just want to make sure that this part of this ball part of the nose is defined, that this shadow kind of really comes up and lets you see, because you could see it in the picture. So I just want to make sure that this is all nice and smooth. Notice how we kind of kept that cheek right there untouched. We kind of have that same sort of reflective light of the cheek. So I like that we did that. And I'm kind of leaving this part of the nose also untouched because that's also the closest area to the light. So that reflective light on the tip of the nose, we want to leave that on there. And then this is all shadow side over here. If you look closely, this is even a little darker. That's why I'm using my pencil to make this just even a little bit darker. And that's what I mean by observing. The best artists in the world are the best at observing things. So just look at the reference picture. You could see right here under the nose, it's even darker. So you're almost seeing shadows within shadows. The more you do this and the more you study faces and study portrait drawing, the more you see shadows within shadows, lights within lights. You know, there's all these different shades of darkness. And like I said, the best artists in the world are the ones that can really see those fine details where beginners just don't see it. They're not trained to see it. So hopefully these videos are going to train you to help seeing these subtle shifts in shadows and lights, and then you can put that into your drawing. Like even right in here, right on this part of the lip, you could see this is darker than right above the mustache. Right above the mustache is lighter on the picture. You see that where the arrow is? So you start seeing things like that. You see that that area is lighter. But then right here by the nostrils darker. So I'm leaving that in there. I'm leaving that transition. And also, the more you do this, the more you learn your tools. You learn what pencil marks are better for eyes and what's better for hair. You learn what blending tools give you nice, different types of blending effects. Like right here, I'm blending that dark that I put down by the nostril, making it smoother. And then I'll use my eraser to kind of lighten it a little bit. And then I'll blend it again. And so I've learned to go back and forth like that to achieve whatever I'm trying to achieve. You know, if I want to make something darker, I'll put a little charcoal down and then I'll blend it in like this. But that might be too dark. So I might need to take my eraser and use my eraser and pull it back a little bit. And see, even working in the nostrils, it's not all one dark color. There's darker areas of the nostril and there's lighter areas of the nostril. And as a beginner, we all just draw all one big dark color. But that's not really how it goes. There's different, you know, the nostril goes back further into the head. So that further area is going to be darker than whatever is up close. So we're slowly moving over to the other side of the eye. We're just kind of giving the nose a good pass over here of just making sure it's looking 3D, realistic. I'm asking myself, how are the shadows here? And see, I'll erase and then I'll blend. And just kind of blend in a little bit here. Now, if anybody has any questions, if I'm saying anything and it sparks a question, just leave me a comment down below and let me know. I answer all my comments, and some of your questions I even answer in future videos. So I definitely look forward to hearing any questions you might have about drawing, charcoal, shading, blending, how to see values, anything like that. Please let me know. So as you can see, we've jumped over to this other eye here. And sort of the same thing that I did before, I'm just kind of drawing shapes. I'm just starting with the upper eyelid and looking at the shape above it, looking at the shape of the eyebrow and comparing that, this area right here, I'm comparing this to the eyelid. And I'm noticing right here it gets real dark, kind of comes down just like this. So see, I'm just looking at the picture, seeing what, you know, like this needs to be dark. And so I ask myself, what shape is it? And just draw the shape. This comes up right towards the edge of the head. It meets right here on the head. Okay. So let's draw that. And then there's a slight darkness here, so I'm just putting a slight little area of charcoal here. And then because we blended the eye, it looks kind of blurry and pushed back right now. So this is now where we're going to bring this eye forward. We're going to make it realistic like we did the other one. Look at the other one, the one that we already finished. It looks like it's looking right at us. It's got reflective light. Now look at the one we're working on. Very bland, but let's make this eye real now. We're going to put in the pupil. And I'm looking at where those highlights are. I'm not going to color over where I want it to be light. So I'll draw like a little square in there. So I'm using my pencil and just drawing a little square. And I'm not going to shade in that square. That's where the reflective light is going to be. So see, I'm blending up here just because this shouldn't be as white as it was. Let's just knock this back down a little bit. And I'm noticing, see, under the eye, it's light on the picture. So you want to keep that in there. Not this light, of course. We're going to knock this back down here by blending the charcoal back in. But we definitely want that to have a lighter area because that is closer than the eyeball. It's hitting more light. So we got to make sure we keep that in there. And see right here, I erased part of the cheek. I made it light, but we don't want it that light, so we knock it back down. And we just made that lighter, and then we knock this back down. See, it's a lot of back and forth, but the more you do it, the easier it gets to start seeing these things. So let's finish up the eye with that white charcoal. And watch, this is going to make it look a little more realistic just by adding these little reflective pieces of light in there. And now all of a sudden, it starts looking like a real eyeball is inside those eyelids. Now, of course, we still have to work more on this eye, but the eyeball is getting there. But all this area above the eyebrow and above the eye, we have to really smooth this out. By the way, this is the very first African-American model that I'm drawing. I picked this picture because I wanted to challenge myself. It's always good to draw something you've never drawn before. And kind of push the boundaries. And I really like his features too. So I wanted to draw someone with a darker skin tone, but I also loved this picture. The way his eyes are, the shape of his nose, the expression of his eyebrows. Those are all things that really attract me to certain pictures and make me want to draw them, is seeing if I can capture somebody's, what's the word I'm looking for? Like their essence or their spirit, or, you know, like that thing that makes them unique. I like to capture that, or I try to at least. And so we're capturing that gaze, that stare that he has with the eyebrows lifted up. We're trying to capture that shape of his nose. He's got a very round nose. You know, he's got just wanted to get his features in here. And I think we did a pretty good job at it. Now right here again, we're working on the cheek. We're trying to look at these subtle shadows on the cheek. So we're slowly refining the drawing. Notice it's slowly becoming more realistic. Remember, when we started this, when you go back and look at the very, go back in this video and look at how it started, it looked like a cartoon scribble or a cartoon sketch. Now, just from blending, the initial blending and starting to add these extra features, look at how it's starting to become more realistic. How we're slowly getting to it looking like almost like a photograph. So we'll zoom out a little bit and we'll start to see how it's slowly coming together. Not there yet. Like I said, this is only part 2 of a 3-part series. Part 3, we're really going to step this up. This video is just concentrating on taking the initial layout and getting it to be more realistic. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're just adding some of these darker tones. Now we're making things darker. We still have to work on our blending. That's what we're going to really concentrate on in part 3. Is really focusing on smooth blending. So if you are having trouble spotting, how to put shadows down, if you're having trouble, with it not being subtle transitions, really stay tuned and watch part 3 after this video, because part 3 is really going to focus on that. So here we're just kind of adding a little bit of the mustache. Notice how even in the mustache, it's not all the same. Like it's right about here is where it stops being as dark. You notice that in the picture. In the picture, this whole part right here is a little dark. It gets darker as it goes down. But there's also light areas. It's not just all mustache. And right above the lips here, it's really light. You see that? There's light all the way down. So I'm using my eraser to just make sure there's a separation between his upper lip and then his facial hair. And if we think it's too bright, we can just blend it back down just a little bit. And I'll do this right here to kind of just soften that edge a little bit. So we're just going to reshape a little bit here, lighten up some of these areas on the lips. This side's a little bit darker, I'm noticing. So I'm just darkening this side. And see, naturally by darkening this side, the other side is becoming lighter. So those are little things you learn too. You don't have to always erase to make something lighter. If you want to make something lighter, you can just darken up something next to it. And by darkening something next to it, you're already making the other thing lighter without ever touching it. So those are little tips and little keys that I've learned as I've gone along. You want to make something lighter, you can either erase it or make something next to it darker. And so because I was working with darker skin tones, I didn't always want to erase to make something lighter. So I would make the darker areas darker. And that kind of taught me something. You learn something with every drawing that you do. Or at least I do. So the more you draw, the more you learn. That's why I kind of, when someone says, how do I become a better artist? And then you always hear, well, practice, or, well, just keep drawing. And you go, yeah, but I'm a beginner, I don't know what I'm doing. So that doesn't help me. But it really you just really have to do your best, and sometimes you have to fail for you to see that, you know, to see your mistakes. You have to at least try, and you have to at least learn where you're failing so you can work on those things. Like, I used to fail a lot on the shading, and I really failed on proportions. You know, I'd make a drawing that looked really good, but it just didn't look, there was just something always wrong with it that didn't make it look like the person. And I'm getting better at that. I'm getting better, but that's something I've been working on to fix and correct, is my proportions and my shading. And that's why I'm doing these videos, is as I'm learning these tips and tricks, I want to share them with you in case it helps you too. In case you're struggling with proportions or you're struggling with shading, maybe you watching these videos alongside with me and asking questions and things like that, it'll help you out too. So again, I'm just kind of making this area. I know this is all in shadow, and this has to be darker than the other side of the face, so I'm just blending in this shadow here. And actually, you know what? We're about finished with this sort of drawing session. So I'm about to cut to a live feed of me talking and me giving you my thoughts on where we're standing with this picture right now. Alright everybody, I think I'm going to stop it right here, and you can see from where we started, we are getting somewhere. We've gone through and done a lot of the blending. We still need to smooth it out a little bit, still a little patchy, and we still need to probably bring out some more contrast with these shadows in this side of the face. But on the next video, we're going to pick up where we leave off here. We're going to hopefully finish this portrait on that third video, where we will finish the shading, finish some of down here on this area, and wrap this up. So, with that being said, I appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or anything, leave me a comment down below. Hit that thumbs up button for me if you like this video. And check out these other videos you see on the screen, some of my other work. And with that being said, I think I'm going to go now, take a break, and come back to this drawing in the next video. So stay tuned.